I'm Mo from the Deep Dark Truth podcast, and I'm here with Angie.
Hi, I'm Angelina Wilson from Kid Missing TV and Kid Missing Radio.
And you probably recognize Angie's voice from our previous episode about The Boy in the Box, which is what we're here to discuss today. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there was a big press conference today that we have been waiting all week for, and we're going to talk about it. We're also going to talk about some questions that we still have and some speculation that's already floating out there. It's only been an hour and a half, people.
Yeah.
But here we are. So let's talk about what we know.
Well, we know his name was Joseph Augustus Zarelli. What a middle name to be saddled with.
It really is. We know that he was born on January 13th, 1953, making him officially 4 years old at the time of his death.
And then he was for a month before.
Yeah, and he was found on February 25th, 1957, which you know if you listen to our previous coverage, because both of our individual shows have covered it. Angie is the go-getter team leader for the Facebook group that is doggedly daily. Where's the update from the Vodoc Society? Where is it? Where is it? I've seen people posting it all the time. And I'm like, I'm waiting too. Did you also hear the rumors that they were going to identify him like a couple days before they announced it? Because the 2 days before they announced, hey, next week there's going to be a press conference, I kept seeing things on Reddit threads like, they know who he is. And I'm like, well, who is he?
No. I first heard that they were going to announce it when my friend Lynn Hansen got a hold of me because she's coming here for the new year and she's from Alabama. And we had worked on Mississippi Delta Dawn together, as well as the case of Daniel Barter. And she had said, did you hear about the Boy in the Box? I said, what about him? She said, they have a name. I said, what? And she went to her Facebook, and her Facebook had the article, and that was the first that I had seen.
For 2 days before. Well, so I had web alerts set up for him. And so I think that's part of it, because when we did the episode,
Google alerts anymore.
I had Google alerts for just the Vodoc Society in general, VDOC Society in general, and America's Unknown Child, and The Boy in the Box, and various Google alerts. And so I was seeing things on Reddit forums, but it was a day and a half before they announced, hey, we're going to do a press conference. We know who he is. And so I was just going crazy for those 2 days, just thinking, okay, well, it's nothing. But I've had experience in the past with fellow podcasters that I know that had to do with the Zodiac Killer cipher being solved. And I heard rumors about that 2 days before. And I'm like, I don't know. This is how the true crime community works sometimes. Leaks. There's always a weak link. So we know that they identified the Boy in the Box. We know his name's Joseph Augustus Zarelli. We also know that
he must have been Italian.
We know that they used genealogy to solve this case. First, they identified who they believed to be the mother. So once they had identified who they believed to be the mother, they went back and looked at birth records. They found a birth record that basically had no match for any other information, a death certificate, a social security card number. They realized that this particular birth certificate did not have a social security number that was ever issued. So they believed that this must be him. Then they did the paternal line of the person that was on the birth record to try and make a conclusive match. And that is what they did.
Yeah, that's what I missed. I missed the very beginning of the.
Oh, okay. So the reason that I bring it up is because these are some other things we know. We know that Joseph Augustus Zarelli has siblings who are living. We know that they are using this same technology now to try and solve at least a dozen other cases. But something very interesting happened during the announcement that I think some people missed, and that is a member of the press asked a question and said that the father's line was denying their involvement. And then
I heard that.
So then both the genealogist, who was actually the chief medical officer, and
she runs Identifying.
I think it was the current lead investigator, both said, no, we have DNA proof that line is correct. So there's a lot of speculation floating online. How much should I say? So I will say that I am not saying this. This is just stuff that is already out there. It has nothing to do with me. I didn't do it. Saying that they believe Cynthia Pashko to be the mother and Augustus J. Zarelli to be the father. So
yes.
This is why I don't think that
in the Boy in the Box group, there is a chat that's separate on Messenger, and you can join it if you want to, where somebody actually posted Augustus Joseph Zarelli's death certificate. And that makes sense because the cops said the name wasn't exact on the birth certificate of the father.
Yes, but also, so this is what just my personal belief, and I'm going to say why. So I do think personally that he's the father. Cannot prove it, but I do not think that she is the mother. And the reason I don't think she's the mother is because they were married a number of years later. Also, the way that the police phrased it is they said that he had siblings on both sides,
yes,
which to me indicates that the mother had children and the father had children that were separate from each other. And if you actually look in the genealogy record, Cynthia eventually married Augustus and they have children together.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at the genealogy. I wanted to do that. But I watched the press conference and then I was getting text messages 9 ways from Sunday.
And absolutely.
Going crazy. So I haven't had a chance to get on the computer and really look at it yet.
Yeah, so then it begs the question, one, if the father's line is saying, like, denying involvement, is it because the father never knew he existed because they were not married? Maybe he never knew. Maybe he thought that she had given the child up for adoption, which then begs the question of the M theory that we can't at this point discount just because we know who his parents are, because the whole idea was that M said that her mother had basically actually bought who they called Jonathan. And we also have the Johnny and the Jonathan of it all that has been associated with possibilities.
I can answer that about who Jonathan was.
Let's talk.
The person that they thought he was would have been a cousin to M, and his name would have been Jonathan Davis because M's name was Martha Davis.
Interesting.
We can say that now. Everyone's dead, and
that's very interesting. But also,
Martha
it still
didn't
doesn't
know her name out because she was a research scientist with Eli Lilly, and she didn't want them to know she was in counseling at the time.
But it's still so with that, that's nice to have like a little loose end tied up there. We don't know that the actual mother didn't give the child up for adoption at some point because the police specifically said this goes into the things that the police aren't saying. And so everybody's speculating. We're speculating. The police basically said that no one is currently alive that was alive at the time that could kind of physically place, like they have an eyewitness to interview. And that makes me wonder if there's no eyewitness to interview, was she in possession of her own child at the time of his death?
Well, interestingly, they said that they had I think it was one of the siblings in homicide yesterday in the press conference.
It's so interesting. Well, that's part of the reason too, that they don't want to release his name because he does have siblings, his parents' names because they have siblings, but
But that makes what you said more likely, that he was the oldest. If there was no one alive.
Yeah, or siblings that he had were 1, 2, 3, 5, young enough to where the trauma of a missing sibling, later they were able to be gaslit into thinking that they never had a sibling, that was just a neighborhood child, or that was just a cousin, or something like that. With children, your memory, when you're reinforced something, is so extremely malleable.
Yes.
So what else do we know? We know that at the time, the police said that they were at the 61st and Market area. I believe he's talking about the mother's location, but again, that feeds back into...
Yeah, I really don't know.
So
I'm not familiar with the city of Philadelphia, but somebody in the chat said that was the predominantly Italian, American Italian part of the city, like the Little Italy kind of thing. So that makes sense. Zarelli.
Yeah, it does. It does make sense.
But it also, I don't know what the laws were in Pennsylvania, but I do know that my mother was born a year after him, and she was not given her father's last name because her parents weren't married. And she was considered what was called a bastard, and her father could have been arrested for bastardry. It was a crime.
That's very interesting. So, I think it would have to do with the laws.
Highly unlikely he would have had his father's last name and his name on the certificate if that was a crime in Pennsylvania at the time, which I do not know.
That would be very interesting to know, especially because that time period. I personally am a bastard. My parents eventually got married, but they weren't married when I was born. Right. And I have other members of my family that had the same type of situation. But even when I was a kid, my great-grandmother, everybody, when my great-grandma died, got bonds and things like that. And I didn't, even though my parents were married by the time she died. Like the moral conundrum
from a different time.
It's so antiquated. So that's also a possibility. But also that brings us back to then, why would the father's name be on the birth certificate? Exactly. Because we know that at least who we suspect is the father wasn't married until 6 years later.
Right. I didn't do the math, but I saw in the, what do you call it? In the obituary, how long they had been married. And I didn't take note of the date and do the math. But you're right. It doesn't add up because he died in 2000. What was it? Or something like that.
I don't have it written down with me.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean that they couldn't have had a kid and then later got married. I just don't think in that time period that's very likely, especially since it was like a number of years later. To me, it doesn't add up for the person that is purported online to be the mother. I also don't think that
have money to get him all the medical care that he had, and they didn't mention any of the medical care or what his issues actually were. You'd think once they found out his name, they would have known all that. Unless I missed something at the beginning.
Yeah, I think that they're being very careful with their information.
Very.
Especially because, let's face it, all of us have thought pretty much since the beginning that this is a result of child abuse. Yeah. Now, that it just has to do with how old some of the traumas were, that some of the trauma was old at the time of his passing. So it wasn't like somebody kidnapped him, did bad things to him, killed him. It was he was recovering from what seemed to be ongoing trauma. He was emaciated, all of these different factors.
That's true.
And so I think that that's another reason why they don't want, because there's siblings involved, until they have concrete answers. They don't want to talk about the parents because the parents are the first suspects. And it would be that in any case.
And there's something else that I saw in the chat. Apparently, and they said he came from a prominent family. There is a local state legislator, I think it's a state senator, who is stepping down, whose name is Joseph Zarelli.
Interesting.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting too. I'm like, well, he's got to be a relative, but he's got to be, I mean, looking at his age, he's got to be a distant relative.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing with genealogy, especially when there's big families. There's cousins, there's second cousins, there's third cousins, especially if either of the parents have a large amount of siblings, especially if this or that.
For a long time, I know.
And let's face it, even if it would have been one of Joseph Augustus's siblings, they would have nothing to do with that. They would have no culpability that would lead to political scandal. So I think that might be related to him, but the stepping down is probably
it's
just coincidence
that it happened at this time. That's what I was thinking too. It was just weird when somebody posted it. I went, okay, he has to be related somehow, but
I'm getting comments because this is a 1 p.m. unscheduled live stream that no one knows exists really yet until they run across it on the internet. I have lots of fun Twitch bots that are like, want to promote your channel? So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of feedback going on right now in terms of people in the chat. But let's see if we can solve that. See if anybody else wants to chat with us. Let me find.
By the way, I will be having Jim Hoffman on Kid Missing Radio. We're going to have a phone call this afternoon and talk about make the arrangements. And he has connections in the Philadelphia PD, so that'll be interesting anyway.
Okay.
I'm glad Bill Fleischer is still here. I'm glad they included Bill Fleischer and the VDAC Society in the press conference.
Me too. Oh my gosh, which brings me to, I just sent you a link to the live stream so you can go ahead and share it around, but I had no idea that Tom Augustine had died 6 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I was shocked. I was legitimately shocked at that.
Jim said to me, well, he just died on October 15th. What? But his daughter is involved. She knows.
I'm so glad that someone in his family knows. That's very good. Oh my.
How do I share this? Oh, the link took me to Facebook.
Yeah, that's just the easiest one. I also have a YouTube link somewhere if you would like me to get a hold of that instead.
I'm going to share it on my Facebook and hopefully people will watch it. But yeah, I would definitely share the YouTube as well because I can, well, but I'm going to let everyone know on my YouTube that we did this because I have to go update my YouTube after.
Well, I just am thinking, hey, it'd be really great to get some other people's perspective going. But that's what happens when you live stream at the.
And Jim can't be here because he's a school teacher, and he's in California, so it's a very different time of day.
It very much is. I was seeing in the group that there was lots of people that were saying, I'm in this country, I'm in that country. How am I going to watch this live stream? Personally for me, because I'm in the Detroit network, it wasn't on my TV at all. I heard that it was on Peacock that you could stream it. I ended up just watching a local news channel on the internet, their live stream footage of it.
That's what I did too. NBC3, I think it was, or something.
Yeah, I did ABC 13, I believe. Something like that. But yeah, very, very interesting in terms of we are getting this information and so many years, 65 years later.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy.
And it was also telling to me that the genealogist said that it was an international effort. So that makes me wonder, were his parents actually born in Italy and came here and had him?
Well, they might have got DNA from the paternal line that is still in another country, or one of the geneticists also could have been in another country, because I also noticed that and wasn't sure if that just meant that they were using geneticists that were like top in their field from other countries, or what.
Yeah. And as far as, he was born there, and I know they had done comparisons of baby footprints.
Yes.
Well, they may very well have compared his footprint, because I learned later on that is not very good. It's not very accurate for comparison. I learned it very recently, actually, involved in another case. They said, oh, those are terrible for comparison. And I said, oh, really? Well, that's interesting, because that's what they used in the Boy in the Box case. So I just sort of made mental note of it, that was the case. So
what questions, what questions do you still have personally?
I'm wondering, like you said, was he with either of his parents? And I hadn't thought of, did his father not know? Because that's possible too. Because I know in my mother's own case, her father had an idea that he had a daughter.
But he wasn't sure, or he didn't know where you were, or...
My grandmother had always said that my mother belonged to the son of a first cousin of L.L. Bean.
Interesting.
And he had paid another mother $800 to go away with a bastard child of his. So we think my grandmother also got paid by telling her that. But my mother, when the DNA came out, was actually another man's child. And we ended up meeting her siblings. Her siblings didn't deny her, because they always knew that there was another sister out there.
Somebody existed,
in Massachusetts. Because, and my mother said, it turns out the man that came to visit me all those years ago, and I hid under the bed, and my mother told him she has a father, because my grandfather, Schmidt, the one that I grew up with, was, what was I going to say? My grandfather, for all intents and purposes, and was Mom's father. He was there from the time she was a year old. So, and he had told his kid's dad, he said, she had a daddy and I didn't want to upset the apple cart. But he didn't really know much more than that, And so, and it's also possible that that woman could be his mother. And I'll tell you why. Because I know, again, going back to my mother's family, my grandmother had her 3 kids with the man that I call my grandfather, John Schmidt, before they were married. But after they were married, he had to adopt his own children, and their birth certificates were changed.
Interesting. But we do know that they weren't married until years after he had passed. If it was an add to birth certificate situation. Also, I'm just so hung up on the police saying that he had siblings on both sides of the family, instead of saying, he has siblings. Like the phrasing, I feel like everything they were saying was so parsed out and particular about
purposeful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Ned Detective, somebody noted he seemed annoyed at one point toward the end, and he really did.
Yeah, well, I think when she was questioning, it had already been said twice in the press conference that he was identified using the maternal line's DNA. They found the birth certificate, and then they made sure that paternal line was also correct by DNA. So they already said that at the top.
Then, I know. And I just looked at the TV and said, DNA, lady.
Yeah. And then she said, the family, the father's family is denying it. What proof do you have? And he said, DNA. And then she said, how? Or something. Like, it was so strange. Yeah. I felt like I understood why she asked the original question. She wanted to get him to say outright that they use DNA so that we could cut it off at the head. Like the question has been asked and answered.
Yeah.
We now know the DNA doesn't lie in that way.
Yep.
But she kept going. He said it multiple times. The genealogist said it, or the chief medical officer said it, and it still was being repeated. I felt it very strange.
Yeah. I have talked to Colleen Fitzpatrick, and she told me she wasn't going to give up, and she didn't. But she said the hardest part, and she said it in the press conference too, that was one of her most challenging cases, because in the beginning she was only working with mitochondrial DNA, which is the mother's side. Until they finally got the whole profile, she was only working with mitochondrial. So she worked miracles.
That's another thing that was answered for me personally during this press conference. Is I think that after the 2019, after they had to exhume the body again to get more DNA, we're sitting here, especially at the beginning of the year in 2022, saying, why is this taking so long? If the DNA is already existing in these ancestry databases, et cetera, and we got the answer, which was that they had to basically clean up the DNA profile, and that has to be done very meticulously to make sure that there are no mistakes. And that is what was helping to take so long, from the time that they actually exhumed and reinterred, before they could even start matching it. They had to do that groundwork. Family was
questioning. Maybe they're questioning like the fact that they had to clean it up, so to speak. But all that means is they use a technique where they literally take the DNA that they have and make more of the same DNA. They make copies so that they have more of it.
Yeah, just very interesting.
They don't move genes around, you know?
Right.
Just so people are clear on how they do that.
Oh my gosh. What other questions do we have?
Well, it's funny. I was taking notes during the press conference from my
I was too. They're a mess.
Oh yeah, mine are a mess too. You're sitting here with a clipboard going. Actually, I'll grab mine real quick.
This is still considered an active investigation, which was many times over pointed out to various members of the press as they asked invasive questions, as the press does and should at points.
Yep.
But things that very obviously they were never going to answer, such as, do you have a suspect? It's like, we're just announcing who he is today. We're not doing that today. That's not what today is for.
Since the beginning of the year, what his name was. I did hear that. I don't know where they got that from exactly, but
yeah, the chief medical officer's name was Constance D'Angelo.
Oh, I was talking about the chief genealogist, Colleen Fitzpatrick.
Got it.
They're now looking for suspect DNA on clothing.
Say that again?
They're now looking for what I think is suspect DNA on clothing that was, I'm going to assume, in the box with him, because I said at the scene.
Interesting. And they did mention the red handkerchief that they believed at first to be a red herring.
That's
sort of speak.
That's what the lady said.
And I thought that was really interesting because...
Interesting wording, yeah.
Yeah. Just very interesting wording. And then immediately followed that up with, at the time, anybody could come in and view the body. And I was like, how are these two things related? Did we just make a jump? Because I was like, okay, why do you think it's a red herring? But nothing. Yeah. We jumped straight to anybody could come in. And I'm like, are you saying somebody that it wasn't with him? That somebody left it on him when they went to go see his body? What are you saying? I don't think it's that.
That wasn't in the box. That was in the area, and the area was a known dump site.
Right. But it's when they said red herring and then immediately jumped to, well, anyone could come in at the time. I was like, how are those two things related? I don't think they are. I think there was just a jump made there that wasn't meant to
right,
seem
and
so
the fact
stark
that it had
in
letter
contrast.
G on it, and his name doesn't have a letter G except the second letter of his first name, middle name rather, then it was obviously a red herring.
Yes. For those just joining us, we are talking about case updates about the boy in the box, America's now known child, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. We're talking about online speculation that has already started about his parents, what happened to him specifically. We've talked about the possibility of the different online speculation that who is speculated as his mother might not be his mother, but that might be his father. We talked about how that links to what the lead investigators said about the birth certificate name not being exactly in terms of the father. And we're just talking about things that we still would like answered. Obviously, we want answered who has done this to him. Obviously, that's the next biggest question that is much bigger than did his father know about his existence,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
Sorry, that's my phone. I'm still getting texts.
Oh, no, do not worry about it. Did you see my email? I had emailed you and Jim last week, and I messaged Jim the link to the article, and then Jim messaged me, not as a reply, like 40 minutes later, and was like, hey, update. And I'm like, I just sent you this link 45 minutes ago. I sent you this link. What are you talking about?
He's very busy.
He is very busy.
But he did reply to your message because I saw it when I got your email, and I did reply to it. So.
Oh, I didn't see a reply from you.
Yeah, I replied to it.
Oh, maybe why would it go to my spam folder? Oh, I'll figure it out. Yeah, so just I was very sad to hear about Tom Augustine, but I'm glad that they really at the beginning of the press conference paid homage to all of the investigators that came before, especially because you have to remember, and obviously you remember, the listener, the viewer has to remember that the police department is the main cause of why there is a gravestone at all. Yes. Why he was able to be moved and have not a name, but a moniker, something to remember him by, and also just to preserve that memory. That moniker is part of the reason this case is solved. America's Unknown Child / the boy in the box, the intrigue of it, then the police keeping that alive is the reason that we now know his name.
Yeah, you know what I think they should do? In cases like this, why not put a family tree, a public family tree, on one of the family tree websites, like Ancestry or MyHeritage or somewhere, of this little boy. It automatically, if you're living, it automatically makes you private. If you do it on like Ancestry, I think MyHeritage might do that too. And that way genealogists like myself, I have over 20 years experience, which really helps me in these cases, by the way, because I know how to use the tools of a genealogist. So it helps me to do these cases. And that might, by having genealogists like myself looking at the tree, somebody might find a link to themselves. Now that you have his name, put his name in a DNA database as his name with his DNA and see who else matches and comes forward. And
I think though that they don't want to do that because they don't want the parents' names released. Obviously, we're all out here sleuthing on the Ancestry sites instantly. As soon as they gave us a birthday and then told us that there was an existing birth record for him, we were all gone, off to the races. All of us. Trying to find something, trying to find things that matched, even if we couldn't find the original birth certificate. which I'm sure is out there. I also just don't have a lot of paid accounts in these various places to be able to.
I do on Ancestry.
And I'm sure you will be off to the races later, especially because with the speculation, that's the one thing we know, that the birth mother's name is going to be on the birth record and be 100% accurate because she was in a hospital having a child.
Well, not necessarily, because on the other side of my family, see, we had a lot of births that happened outside of marriage in a time period when that just was not okay. My grandmother had 3 daughters before she married my grandfather, and she had them with a married man. Well, they all ended up with different last names. The oldest ended up with her maiden name. The next one ended up with her father's actual last name somehow. And the youngest one, no, she didn't. I'm sorry. The middle one ended up with her grandmother's maiden name, my grandmother's mother's maiden name somehow. And the youngest one ended up with her actual father's last name. But anyway, the point being, when my grandmother delivered when my grandmother delivered the youngest daughter, she delivered her under the name of the father's actual wife.
Wow.
So, yeah, you find things in genealogy when you start finding birth records and stuff.
That's very interesting. Well, we do know, though, that they said they found the birth certificate for them through the mother, and then they confirmed it with DNA. So we do know that the DNA profile of that is on the birth certificate of both the mother and father has been confirmed.
Yeah, I understand that. I was just telling you that does happen.
Yeah, it does. It does happen 100%.
And it doesn't matter now. They're all, well, my aunt has severe dementia, is in her 80s, doesn't have a clue, and actually freely admitted that happened. But she's the one that told us, and everyone else is dead. So it doesn't matter, It's just an example.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably it for now.
Yeah.
For now only.
Yeah.
Now we know the name.
I will send you a link as soon as I actually I'll send you an invite, because I'll do what I do when I do a podcast is I do an event on Facebook and send invites so people know.
Right. Interesting.
But they're not live now because I do it through Anchor. So I have to upload it after, but it's going many more places thanks to you. You are the one that.
Well, normally I have Chip and Mikey. So when we do record independently, but when we do live streams, we use StreamYard because we have all kinds of fun banners and we can highlight comments made by people and to discuss. So I really do like StreamYard as a platform. Well, until next time, I've been Mo, and this is Angie.
And I'm Angie. And
we'll talk to you later.
Deep Dark Truth and Kid Missing.
Absolutely. And you will see in the description a link to Angie's show, Kid Missing, so that you don't miss it in the future. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.